Yes, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Carvelli. Welcome to the Friday, December 16, 2016 California State Athletic Commission meeting located here in our wonderful Capitol building. This year, we pursuant to our requirements, we hold a meeting here in Sacramento. This is our fifth meeting this year, final meeting for 2016. So we're really glad that we can make it. We have a busy agenda. Mr. Foster, will you please, let's all stand and we'll move to the pledge of allegiance. Commissioner Sauer? No? Okay. Dr. Wood, for that.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Foster, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Carvelli?
Here.
Vice Chairman Lehman?
Here.
Commissioner Senior Quidez? Commissioner Souter?
Here.
Commissioner and Dr. Williams?
Here.
Sir, we have Commissioner Frierson and Commissioner Ayala not present today.
Do we have a quorum?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
We have a quorum. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is being live feed sent out to the world, so please, when you're welcome to, of course, participate and speak clearly into the microphones. This gentleman will tell us if we need to repeat things when you come on up. Now, see, you were supposed to tell me. I asked you guys. Okay.
I heard him fine.
We heard you.
Okay. So we're going to speak clearly into our open microphone, so thank you for doing that. Here's an opportunity for me to make a couple of comments. I just wanted to point out, even though it's not year end, some of the things that the Commission and Andy and the staff have been working on this year that we can be proud of. Certainly, we can tell you that there has been an increase in events. That's a great trend. And of course, we believe that's a testament to the work that's being done by Andy and our staff and this commission. So we congratulate you guys for that. That's a great thing. Some other outstanding things that have taken place is a real determined outreach and persistent outreach to the California tribal nations. Andy, I know you attended a national meeting in Oklahoma with the Chickasaw tribe. You've been invited to speak next year. We've signed more compacts with some of the tribes, and we expect to do even more. Yes, sir. So if there's anything you want to add later, please do. But I think that's also some great work that we can be proud of and follow up on.
Thank you, sir.
C3, concussion testing, brain injury testing. I'm not going to mention it other than I want to mention the fact that it's happening, and we're very excited about it. You're going to talk a lot more about that today. Stay tuned for that. And then something that I think several of us here, Commissioner Martha, Dr. Williams, Mary Van, we, for a while now, have been working hard to make relevant our neurological fund. And this year, I think we can say that, yes, as a matter of fact, we can tell you that our neurological fund is being spent for the appropriate activities and brain testing and other things, and I know you're going to talk more about that. So that's something that I feel really good about. Finally, Andy, you went to the Association of Boxing Commissions. We're going to be talking about some new rules that look really interesting for us. We look forward to that. And congratulations on your latest award from the World Boxing Council, their international meeting in Miami, Florida. He showed me a picture of this ring with the big WBC thing, and there's Andy's name on it. It looks really good.
Thank you, sir.
So when we prick off the jewels, I'd like to get a couple of the rubies. Save those for me. So, okay, with that, thank you all. And let's move to agenda item number 3. This will be the approval of the October 18, 2016 Commission meeting minutes. Mr. Foster.
Mr. Chairman, the minutes are
Behind tab number 3.
behind tab number 3, and
Do you have anything you would like to add?
no, sir.
Mr. Duke?
I
Counsel?
wasn't present at the last meeting, so I...
Okay. It's good to see you back.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's open it up to the commissioners then. Commissioner Martha, would you like to have any comments on the meeting minutes?
Yes. Erica St. Phillips with an S.
With an S, are you sure?
That's how I've always spelled it.
Let's confirm it,
Let
please.
me check. I'll have to check on that. Yes, sir.
So make sure that name is accurate. If not, please do correct it.
Okay.
And I have a couple of typos. Page 2, the large paragraph starting with Tom Loeffler. The third line, the difference between commissions. And then if you go down to the first sentence, Tom Taylor, CSAC referee applauded. And then the next line, which allows him. I think those are the really major ones. Oh, I'm sorry. In that same paragraph, if you, 1, 2, 3, 4 line from the bottom, K2 promotion and looks forward to continuing working with them,
To work with them,
Yeah.
continuing to work with
or
them.
continued working with them.
Okay.
I think those are the major ones.
Okay? Thank you. Dr. Williams?
I didn't have any additions.
I do not have any comments. Vice Chair?
Well, first of all, really good job on the minutes. I love that they're so thorough and long, and as you know, having to go back sometimes to look at minutes to find out what we did, it's very important that they're thorough and adequate and correct. And so I noticed that we've really stepped up in doing that. So thank you also to Ms. Coneja. One error in agenda item 4, when we refer to Max DeLuca, I believe it should be a CSAC judge versus referee.
Yes, sir. Yes.
And I did look up Erica St. Philip, and it is Philip, no S. And that was all I had. Good work, guys.
Thank you. Commissioner Souter?
No.
Nothing. Here's an opportunity for members of the public to stand up and state your name, and if you have any comments or questions about our last meeting minutes, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll call for a motion to approve the minutes, please.
I so move.
Commissioner Shannon Arquitez, we have a second.
I'll second.
Vice Chair Lehman. All those in favor? Aye. Do we need to roll call that? I'm sorry. Gary? Yes, sir. Okay, here we go.
Chairman
Please call
Corbelli,
the roll. Yes.
Vice Chairman Lehman,
Aye.
Commissioner Senior Quidez,
Aye.
Commissioner Souter, Commissioner and Dr. Williams.
Aye.
5-0, sir.
Thank you. Agenda item number 4. Business and Professions Code, Section 18640.5 requires the California State Athletic Commission to invite stakeholder testimony at commission meetings in order to identify actions that may lead to greater opportunities for licensees to participate in major professional boxing contests. Recognition, or this is a B, of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the UFC, for providing greater opportunities for CSAC licensees to participate in major professional mixed martial arts contest, we believe helps to fulfill that mission, that obligation, that requirement of this commission. And so we have invited and we welcome officials and a champion from the UFC here today to accept an appreciation from us. And so, Mr. Foster, would you please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Reed Harris. He's a senior vice president of athlete development with the UFC. Mr. Harris, I believe, is a California resident. Formerly a California resident. But he owned WEC, World Extreme.
We don't like losing people to Nevada, so. Thank you.
And Mr. Benavidez, who just won a close fight, Mr. Cejudo. I believe it was a split. Was it a split? It was a split just the other day, and he's here. And, you know, I think the UFC will have big things for Mr. Benavidez in the future. So that's our two guests from the Ultimate Fighting
Thank you.
Championship.
So we have some presentations for you. Reed, would you like to say something? Yes, I would. Please come forward, introduce yourself. And,
Right here?
or I think right here, right?
Yeah. Here?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Make sure the mic works.
Thanks. So, Mr. Chairman and members,
Please introduce yourself, Ty.
I am Reed Harris, Vice President of Athlete Development for the UFC and former owner of the WEC, which was licensed and did their shows almost exclusively, all but one, in California when I owned it. On behalf of all our dedicated staff and our owners, Ari Emanuel, Peter Whitesell, and Dana White, I would like to thank the California Legislature and also the California State Athletic Commission, for which we believe, by the way, is one of the finest in the United States. And I was told to say that yesterday when I talked to the office, because they truly believe that.
Okay.
For the special recognition. We would also like to thank both the legislature and the commission for their continued direction and support over the years, which we believe has had a positive and profound impact on the Ultimate Fighting Championship and also on the sport of MMA. On a personal note, my fondest memory of all the shows I've done and been at, which are hundreds, was when in 2006 UFC bought the WC, and in April of 2010, we did our largest and biggest show at the Arco Arena, where a guy you're all familiar with, Uriah Faber, fought a very game Jose Aldo. When Uriah came out to his signature song, California, I literally thought the building was going to collapse. And isn't it fitting that this Saturday night at the Golden One Center, Uriah Faber will step into the cage for the last time? I saw the arena yesterday, and it's absolutely beautiful, and it's a testament to the fact that UFC can come into an arena like that and fill it, and we're really, really excited about it. And finally, before I introduce Joseph Benavidez, who's probably one of the finest fighters I've ever had the experience of working with, we couldn't accept the award without thanking Andy Foster. Andy, without your great vision, leadership, and unflinching concern for the athletes and their safety, we don't believe MMA in California would be where it's at. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'd also like to introduce one of our family. Both Megan Olivi, Joe's wife, and Joseph have been involved with the UFC for a long, long time. After the Cejudo fight, I sent Joe a note and said that was technically one of the finest fights I'd ever seen. He was fighting a gold medalist in wrestling and prevented him from taking him down, which is quite a feat. So Joseph is a professional at all levels. He's always willing to talk to the fans. He's always willing to do the work in promoting, and we couldn't be prouder of him. Joseph Benavidez.
I don't even know how to follow that up. Thank you, Reed. Appreciate it. But I just want to thank the commission for the recognition here today. It's awesome to be in here and be a part of it. I've trained and lived and competed in California the majority of my career, and it's been an honor every time. Thanks to outstanding work that you guys do, so it's awesome to be here, and look forward to doing it again and the amazing shows to come in the future.
Thanks, champ.
Thank you, guys.
Before you go, commissioners, do you have anything you wanted to maybe talk to Rita or the champ here about, or anybody?
It
Comments?
was an amazing final. That was so much fun to watch.
Thank you so much.
That was really fun. Actually, the whole season was really fun to watch.
Oh my God, thank you. I had a great time doing it.
Yeah.
Very great experience.
So how about we get here in the well and we give you your resolution and certificate, and then we'll do that next. Okay, Andy? Okay. Yes, sir. Oh, if you guys want to come down.
Joseph is the reason I don't fight.
This is the quarantine, so
Okay. So, here we go. We have to write this down. The Ultimate Fighting Championship, world-renowned mixed martial arts promotion company has made contributions of noteworthy importance to the sport of MMA and the economic vitality of the state of California, as well as to charitable, nonprofit organizations whose missions benefit youth advocacy, health, public social services, and LGBTQ rights and equality, in recognition of which the organization is deserving of special commendations. So the rest are whereases, but we have first.
I actually read it.
Would Andy have, maybe you could describe that?
This is our certificate of appreciation from the commission design. So it's signed by Chairman and myself.
Okay, Joseph, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Everybody smile. This one, Vice Chair Lane, is holding this from the Senate. And so that takes a lot of effort and work, I want you to know.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, not that you deserve it and people weren't happy to do it, but it is actually signed by the Senate President, Senator De Leon. And I know Commissioner Ayala wanted to be here to see this too, but he couldn't make it, so, but congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We are absolutely honored to accept this. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Okay?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, that was fun. Now we have some work to do. Agenda item number 5, Executive Officers Report. Mr. Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With me today, I have Mark Ito, who is the DCA Budget Analyst, and Mr. Taylor Schick, who is the Fiscal Officer for the department. I've asked Mr. Ito and Mr. Schick to appear. I know that at the last meeting, there were some questions regarding pro rata issues, and then also I think it's an appropriate use of the commission's time once a year to at least meet the budget staff, the staff that I deal with almost on a daily basis, and kind of give you an update over the fiscal condition of the commission. Just my normal report. This is not in your packet, and I didn't provide handouts per our policy, but this came out yesterday from the CalSTARS fiscal month 5. So through 5 months of the year, the commission has deposited $556,961 and has spent $598,760. We're running a small deficit, which guaranteed the month of December will more than make up for, as we've already deposited close to $100,000 at this point. The fund condition is sitting currently at $1,004,131. And our projections to year end showing a projection surplus of 1.9%, or a give back of $32,517 of appropriation. Now, I actually expect that to tighten significantly. Certainly not going to run a deficit, but I think we'll be, at least at the current time, especially with the new neurological testing, that we're not going to run that out of the neuro fund because we're maxed this year in appropriation. So I'll be paying the inspectors to do the testing out of the support fund. So I certainly expect that number to tighten a bit. But at this time, I'll turn it over to Mark Ito from the Budget Office.
Good morning, Mr.
Welcome, Mark.
Carvelli and the Commission. My name is Mark Ito. I'm your budget analyst. I work closely with Andy to ensure that you guys spend within your budget. All programs under DCA participate in incremental budgeting. This means that the starting point for for building each year's budget is the prior year's Budget Act, which is approved by the governor. From there, we make various current year and budget year adjustments, and these are the result of budget change proposals, executive orders, and the end result for this year for your current year appropriation is $1.669 million, which is the number that you'll see in the governor's budget. Included in your budget materials that Andy went over, these show your projected expenditures, revenue, and fund reserves. Now, your program is a little unique in that your revenue expenditures are largely dependent on the number of events you have in California. As you said earlier, they're increasing. And athletic inspector pay, travel, and drug testing are directly affected by the number of these increasing events. So your expenditures are slightly rising, as Andy has said previously. Now, in regards to your current year expenditures and revenue, Andy stated this, as of fiscal month 5, you guys are spending within your budget and are on track to meet or exceed your total revenue projection for the year. And one thing I wanted to mention is that Andy's done a good job with your fund. Approximately 5 years ago, your fund balance was down to almost $25,000, which is really low. It's almost to the point of being insolvent. But Andy did a great job of increasing revenue with these events, but while at the same time reducing your spending. And now you guys have over $1 million in your fund, which is a good thing. So at this point, I will welcome any questions you have about your budget.
Commissioner Martha, you want to start? Go ahead. I know you have questions.
Okay, so I guess the thing that mostly I don't understand is the pro rata.
Okay. Taylor Schick is going to do a pro rata presentation for you.
Was that next on your?
Yeah, that's next. So I can welcome any budget questions, answer those.
Okay. Let's see if we have any. Thank you, Mark. Do we have any questions for Mark on the budget?
No,
Commissioners?
largely the budget I understand.
Yeah.
Pro rata is where I have questions.
Okay. Dr. Williams? Any questions for Taylor? Okay. Commissioner Souter, you good now? Okay. Okay, Taylor, take it away.
Good morning. I'm Taylor Schick. I'm the budget officer for the department. I will be addressing your questions on pro rata. I know that's sort of a confusing topic for a lot of people. We did have a meeting back in either early November, late October, where we go over the distributed process, and we did have a couple handouts that were at that meeting. I'm currently working with our executive office. There's been we had to make a couple tweaks to it. I'm trying to get that packet into a PDF format that I can provide to Andy that he can then share with all of you. It's a very good packet. It details a little bit of the budget building process, as well as it also gives an overview of all of the various offices within the department, all of our divisions, what sort of services we provide, how we provide it, and the methodology in which we distribute those costs out to the programs. As Mark had identified, the state primarily uses an incremental budget building process. So every time we're building the budget, we're building it anywhere from 18 months to 12 months in advance of when the legislature is going to actually sign off on the Budget Act. And one of the responsibilities of the Budget Office is to ensure that the costs of the department are recovered in full by all of our various boards and bureaus. So what we enter into is we do a distributed cost, and that's how we sort of call our pro rata. It's a distributed cost methodology. So we come up with the best methodology on how to distribute the department's costs across all of our various boards and bureaus. And we have a variety of methodologies. The primary one that we use, because we do not do time-based accounting currently, the primary one we use is a position allocation methodology, meaning that a lot of our administrative overhead costs are going to be distributed to the various programs within the department based on your total positions to the whole of all the other boards and bureaus within DCA.
Staff positions.
So your staff positions. So if you have 10 positions authorized, you'll have that share of the 10 positions of the more than about 3,000 positions that are within the boards and the bureaus of the department. We do have a couple other methodologies where we have workload metrics that allow us to distribute a little bit more accurately. One of those would be our call center. So that's going to be distributed primarily based on calls received. They actually track it by inquiry based off if a call comes in for the Bureau of Investigative Services, they'll make sure and code it to that one, and then will take the total volume of calls and distribute it to all those various programs based on their total call volume.
Calls from the office, the staff office?
These are calls that do not go to the office. These are calls that go to a consumer information center within the department. So we have a 1-800 line that's on our website that directs all individuals. If they have a complaint, an inquiry, they go into there. One of the drawbacks, though, is we are the Department of Consumer Affairs, so a lot of the calls we do receive oftentimes can be non-jurisdictional. We get a lot of landlord-tenant disputes calls coming in. So we do have a section of those calls which are non-jurisdictional. We break those out of that budget, and then we distribute the costs of CIC handling those calls to all programs, again, based on a position allocation. Everyone within the department basically shares the burden of, us bringing in calls for things that might be outside of our jurisdiction, because we're not just going to hang up the phone on individuals that might have a complaint. We're going to try to direct them to the appropriate agency that can resolve their matter for them. Additionally, we have an Office of Information Services. A lot of their costs are derived specifically on widget counts, whether or not it's transaction volumes in our IT databases, whether or not it's Breeze or ATS and CAS, applicant tracking system and consumer affairs systems. Those are the legacy systems of our program that a majority of the programs are on. They also track PC support volume, website hits, LAN, WAN, other costs like that. So we distribute a little bit more fine-tuned there because we actually have information to pull in which to more accurately distribute based on an individual program. So those are some of the major ways that we try to fine-tune our methodologies to make sure that every program is paying a correct share of the department's overhead costs. The one thing I probably didn't mention is we also have a division of investigation. We utilize a 2-year roll forward methodology. When I mentioned we build the budget incrementally, we're always working 18 months in advance. If I'm building the budget for this next year, which is fiscal year 17-18, the last true year of full data I have to work off of is fiscal year 2015-16. So we're 2 years removed. We're going to be charging you 2 years removed when the actual work took place. So for the Division of Investigation specifically, we track it by hours for investigation. We'll track what we charged you. We'll track what we should have charged you, which will give us either a credit or a debit, and we'll ensure that we roll forward that credit or debit into the following budget. So we're always working sort of 2 years behind.
You guys do a true-up, huh?
But we're trying to do a true-up, and that's a similar way to the way statewide pro rata is done. They typically try to do a 2-year roll forward or a true-up to make sure that where they have widget volumes and they can correct the amounts that they charged, whether too much or too little, they'll make that correction in the following fiscal year. I know that was a lot of information to provide you right in this one place. I'm hoping that we can get that DCA pro rata guide out to you probably within the month once all the corrections have been made in a PDF format, which will help describe a little bit more detail what all services are provided out of the department.
So first I want to say that I think in all the time that I've had any contact with CSAC, probably currently I have an appreciation for DCA more than ever, because I think DCA has provided us with more support than I think I've ever experienced. And so for that, we're very thankful. With respect to the budget, our concern, at least my concern, is to be able to have some predictability going forward. And in that regard, I have to have some understanding of how to be able to assess what is coming. So in the last year and maybe more, there have been incremental increases that have just come randomly. We haven't been able to predict them, some of them big, some of them small, and we can't figure out why, and we can't figure out how these increases have been figured out. A small one, for example, I was looking at the DCA's audit. And the DCA's audit says that we had a pro rata of 190,000 for year 2015, 2016. But actually, the true pro rata was 193,000. So somewhere between the time that DCA had an audit and our actual end fiscal year payout, there was a $3,000 increase that we got hit for. We don't really know why. We don't really know how that $3,000 allocation came out, how it was figured out. And it's not a huge allocation, but, you know, at some point, it would be nice to know how that came about and why it came about. It would also be nice to know, you know, with the authorized personnel, it's not actual personnel, because the authorized personnel doesn't mean that we actually have them. So we may have 9.5 authorized personnel, but we actually only have like 4 working for us. And we're never gonna probably have the 9.5 working for us, because if we get to the 9.5, it'll be difficult to navigate either getting rid of them or, you know, at this stage. So I'd like to know, is there some way to increase or decrease, or are we just stuck with that? So that's my second question. My third question is, we get hit with a pro rata on the pension, and our pension fund, and also our neurological fund. And we don't actually even have people working in. So why do we pay out on the neuro fund a pro rata? And then mid-year, last year, we got hit with a massive increase on the pro rata. I think it was like 108,000. You know, there was no way to predict that. So, I mean, I understand that we're gonna have these increases, but we have to have some predictability. Otherwise, there's no way we're going to be able to navigate our budget. And the one thing that we don't use is the BREEZE system. But I think we get hit for some apportionment of that. Is there some way that we can get that taken out of whatever we have to pay for? I understand that we get a lot of support, and we really do appreciate that. But if there are items that we don't use, can we not pay for them? Because we are a very small commission, and we work really, really hard to tighten up the belt and make sure that we don't get to where we were 5 years ago. So I think it's, for me, the concern is fairness, but most of all, just predictability.
Okay, and I would agree with you. A lot of times, we're making changes to the budgets even after the Budget Act has been released. To your first point regarding the audit, I think the figures that they were looking at when they discussed the pro rata, total pro rata for the commission, they were looking at what was approved in the Budget Act. One of the incremental changes that are made every year, and it's not just for the next fiscal year, but it also changes our current fiscal year, is we get a lot of budget letters from the Department of Finance, whether or not it's changes to the retirement rates that the state pays for all of its positions, or it could even be incremental changes for employee compensation increases. There is a current year share of that can augment all programs. So typically there's a direct charge or direct charge to every program, because we're going to make sure that you're appropriated in full for the new charges that are going to be incurred for those retirement rate increases. On the offside to that, there's also that same increase to the department. So we need to make sure we allocate those costs out to the department. So that $3,000 change is most likely due to a current year augmentation that was made pursuant to one of those budget letters. So we always have the Budget Act figure, but that Budget Act figure can change based on actions made by the Department of Finance that authorize current year changes.
Well, see, that's a very good point, because, for example, with the Silver Service, Silver Service has raises that adjust up, but our revenue stream doesn't necessarily have an adjustment that goes up commensurate with the civil service adjustments. So that already, we get hit with those, so there has to be some way for us to be able to adjust and predict those kinds of adjustment, of increases that DCA has.
And to the best of our ability, we try to let you know what's coming out. When the governor's budget is released and it is official, and that'll become official on January 10th, we typically have a meeting with every single board bureau, and we'll have one with the commission to detail what the budget was, starting out the 16-17 Budget Act, what incremental changes were made in the current year, and what changes were made out in the budget year. And we try to itemize them and be able to explain every single adjustment so it's as clear as possible. But I would share in that frustration. We have a lot of programs that, we do not get any general fund money. All of our programs are typically set by either licensing fees, and their licensing fees do not scale at the same rate that retirement rates increases can happen or employee compensation adjustments might happen. Those are all pending bargaining unit agreements and things of that nature. So those things can change, and a lot of our programs are put in a position where eventually they do need to adjust for higher cost increases.
So can we because it's very hard to have these conversations here, are we able to have meetings with your office one-on-one on a sit-down basis other than here before this happens and before our budget comes out and before our spending authority comes out, so that we can have these conversations before we get hit with an increase that, here, set in stone, you're done, $108,000 later, which is basically what happened to us last year.
I'm sure I'll have to probably lean on Mr. Duke here a little bit, but I think just having one member, would that be in violation of Bagley-Keene, having them
That's totally
present in a budget meeting
That'd be fine.
where we can go all the information in more detail?
Available, in fact.
Okay. No, that's definitely something we can do, and I think that would actually be very favorable, because then we can lay out everything and try to thoroughly explain some of the changes that we deal with, how they impact your program directly, and how those global ones that impact the department are assessed to all of our various boards and bureaus.
That would be really helpful. Then we can at least plan ahead, and it won't be such a shock to our system when this comes out.
Sure, and I think actually probably the best time to actually have that meeting would be coming up in January. Once the governor's budget is released, we'll do a full budget summary meeting. We typically do that with Andy and all of our other programs every single year, and that's a good time really to go forward and explain every single adjustment that was made, whether or not it's a BCP or a budget letter, changes that Department of Finance is making to the way the budget's displayed. There's a lot of good information that we can share with you at that time.
Great.
So will you work, Mr. Foster, with Taylor to set up such a meeting for us, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thanks. You good? Dr. Williams? Any questions? Vice Chair?
I'm fine.
Good? There's no issue.
I do have a question, just pretty basic. So the more staff we have, the more we pay per rata? Generally, is that?
So, generally that would be the case. The idea is the larger you are and the larger share you have of the total department, the more of that small share you would have of the total pro rata distribution that we have. We have looked at possibly using filled position rate because various programs have different levels of filled positions each year. Some are more fully staffed than others. But there's typically work that goes on in various units regardless of whether or not you have those vacancies. Oftentimes, if you have a lot of vacancies, you're probably working heavily with our Office of Human Resources to try to fill them. So we typically do it based on that authorized position count. One of the other ways we did look at is doing it by overall budget, total budget size to the whole of the department. But that skews it a little bit more because we do have some programs that may have budgets for certain services that really should not, that don't affect the department and sort of throw off that scale. But it is something that we're always looking at. And without, having that more accurate time-based accounting, the authorized positions is sort of the best indicator of what every program's commensurate share is of our departmental services, for those ones that are allocated based on that methodology.
And then I understand that you tweak it a little bit you monitor different ways about how busy the board or the commission is. And so the busier the board or commission is, the more we pay pro rata?
No. So
The
right
opposite,
now,
okay.
you might get more work this year than you do next year. But the amount that we allocate you is going to be based on that same methodology. The only times where and to use the term busy, the only times we would have an increase in those allocations is if we actually have a good metric by which to base the workload that is provided to the program.
Provided by DCA?
Provided by DCA. So if
Okay,
we have like
okay.
a metric that can indicate that, and we have that a lot more often with our Office of Information Services, because they'll be able to track, the number of phone lines that you have, the number of hits that occur on your website. Those are things that we can physically track and tie to workload.
I just want to be clear, is that we pay more if DCA works for us more versus if we just work more?
Oh, no, yes. that's
Okay,
correct.
that's a key
Not if we just
distinction.
work
I was
more,
like, this is
that's
not
how
fair, okay. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Commissioner Sauter?
I'm pathetic about all this, so bear with me. What percentage of our budget is the DCA?
So I actually do have that. The average for the department-wide for all boards and bureaus, and it does change depending on which programs get which services from the department, especially those ones that are directly assessed based on true workload, like the Division of Investigation. But the majority of our programs, the percentage of their budget which is directly related to DCA pro rata is about 15 to 20%. The commission right now is 14% out of its support fund and 8% out of the pension fund. And actually 0 out of the neurological right now. I'll have to see what it was
But what is
in a previous
the
year.
total percentage
The-
of the DCA?
At 14 and 8?
The total percent, the overall DCA that's that 14 and 8 of the commission's specific budget. So 14% of the commission's budget is specifically dedicated to departmental pro rata.
Does that vary dramatically from what it was 5 years ago?
I can take a look. I know the overall percentages have increased a little bit with some changes and, definitely with our IT implementation of Breeze. Some of those have changed, but for the commission, it has not increased significantly with the exception of the increase in staff that we had about 3 years ago for the commission. But even then, it would have scaled along with your budget increasing.
And is that the 14% in effect close to what it is for all the groups that you administer?
I would say on
Higher, lower?
on average, you're a little bit lower than the average, but like I say, it skews. We have programs that have their entire enforcement functionality paid for and worked out of the department, so obviously their share is going to be significantly higher. But like I had mentioned, that the average for the department is right around 20%, and you're at 14%, so it's a little bit lower than the average for the entire department.
Thank you.
Actually, our general is at 13, and the neurological fund is at 5, and the pension is at 7. Because 3,000 was taken out of the neural.
Okay, so I'll have to take a look at it. It could be, are you including statewide pro rata in that? So I'll take a look. Just knowing off my notes right here, I don't have anything hitting neurological, but at that meeting that we're going to have next month, we'll have it a fully laid out spreadsheet to go over all those costs.
And we are still lower than most. I think the medical board is the highest, but yeah.
Okay. Gentlemen, Taylor, you were describing your 2-year lag, basically, where you work on a true-up. Does this apply to that, is that, the metrics applied to pro rata, or is that separate?
It's applied to part of our pro rata, but not to all of our pro rata. Only to those areas that we have specific workload that we can actually determine whether or not a true-up is necessary. Obviously, doing it based on authorized positions, we don't have a very clear indicator of how much was worked in any specific year. It's just the fairest methodology to distribute across all of our programs without having a specific metric. But for our Division of Investigation, we have actual investigatory hours that we can track. So then we can actually determine, we assessed you as if you were going to have 1,000 hours. You only really truly
Right.
incurred 800.
Okay.
We're going to roll forward a credit for you for the following budget.
Right.
What's the, of the services that we in effect are billed for, what is the largest one? What is the major cost we bear that relates to what you provide?
And it's going to be sort of a large figure. That would be our administrative services, and that's specifically looking at the executive office, the legal office, legislative and regulatory affairs office, budget shop, accounting, human resources, business services, those administrative functions. That's going to be the largest share of the commission's budget as it pertains
And is there
to.
one of those which is the largest?
I don't have that information right offhand. I would have to pull it.
Or are they all sort of the same?
The way it all pulls together on my charts, I'd have to figure out which one might be the largest, but it all pulls together. It's one division within our administrative structure, so we track it by that division. And that would be the highest cost division within our department.
So the legal variable is probably something that we can talk about at our meeting, because that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes.
I know Gary needs to get paid, so it's good. Commissioners, anything else for Taylor? Gentlemen, this is very helpful to us, so thank you very much. We really do appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you soon,
Okay.
so we can get into a little more of the weeds here. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just
sir.
quickly just cover and just see if they have anything else to add about the Nero Fund. We've only spent $221 so far in the Nero Fund, but that's only because the C3 Logics contract has not hit yet, okay? That's coming. Once that comes, I would imagine almost the entire appropriation, and the entire $61,000 will be spent, okay? Probably at the next commission meeting, we'll have that for you, but I think that's a fair statement to say. Once that contract, and it's been approved, it's just waiting to be paid. So I just wanted to share that with you while the budget staff was up here. Do you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, I worked with Andy on that, just to kind of look at the cost of the C3 Logic. So we determined in the budget office that you guys could absorb those costs within your existing resources for the upfront costs and ongoing.
Great, thank you, that was very.
And kind of the idea, we've kicked it around a couple of ways, but for full disclosure, what we're planning on doing is kind of a combination of staff support. When I say staff support, I'm talking about the athletic inspectors, okay, not office staff, to actually administer the test. Will probably still be coming out of the support fund. I think that's what we did determine in the ongoing years. But we still can always go back and allocate it back to the Nero Fund if we need to, as long as there's an appropriation there. It's just the difference between $61,000 and $1,700,000. It's easier to find 30 grand in $1,700,000 than it is in 61,000 when we're paying the ongoing licensing fees. And that's just I don't want to belabor the point. That's just my full disclosure for you. And sir, with your permission, I'll just hold on the pension fund. I mean, I can give you, but we have a whole agenda item on it to cover the
Please,
budget.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Foster?
Thank you, Mark.
Keep rolling.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd like to bring up Sophia, and she can go over our regulations. I might just point out before she begins, this commission has been quite successful with these regulations so far, and that is a process, so she's done well with
An
it.
expert here, right? We have our in-house expert.
So, not a whole lot has changed since the last meeting. Payment of contestants is in your binder today. It's on the agenda for today. I'm sorry. I'm confused. No. Payment of contestants, we've already voted on. It's already been submitted to DCA on October 31st. Examination of boxer applicants and neuro assessment was also submitted to DCA, the final package, on November 16th. Headgear was submitted, final package, on October 7th. I did follow up on that one, and they said it's actually at agency, which is, agency and Department of Finance are left for that package. Weighing time, the dehydration package, that was submitted October 31st to the department. And on the agenda today is technical zone, so you'll talk about that later. So 5 rulemaking packages. Any questions?
Questions?
Is this technical zone one, is this being done on an emergency?
No.
Unless you vote it that way.
I think
Probably should be.
we'll talk about it when it's on the agenda.
Okay.
We follow your orders.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would like to add one thing. When Sophia mentions that something has been submitted to the department, that seems like a big black box. There's actually a lot that goes on there. It has a subsequent review by not only the legal office, myself, but also goes to our regulatory office, who keep track of it. And there's our control agency also has to have a review of it, and they submit it to the Department of Finance. And then after we receive approval from Department of Finance from their review, then it's formally submitted to the director, which the director, can either veto the regulation if necessary, but you can override that veto by unanimous vote. So there is a lot more that goes on. It just doesn't go to, let's say, myself or just one person. It goes through many eyes.
And the budget office.
Oh, and the budget office also, yes, of course.
In some cases, the IT office, like in C3 Logic, yeah, right. Okay, thank you. Mr. Foster.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, we'll move on to the status of the delegated entities. We'll begin with CAMO. We have Mr. Steele here from the California Amateur Mixed Martial Arts Organization.
Come forth, be sworn.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. JT Steele with CAMO. This is our slow time of year. This is a December not like any other. It's pretty normal. It's a time where we have a lot of opportunity to review rules and regulations and work on our procedures, trying to improve for 2017. So although it is a slow time in events, it is a welcome time for us to work on housekeeping and moving forward with initiatives. That being said, we gave a very, very in-depth a review last time to Andy Foster, so we kept it quite brief. But if you have anything that you'd like to discuss, couple things that I thought we should go over, and I think most of them are probably most appropriate just to work with Andy on, is we have a lot of amateur promoters right now who have been doing well in the amateurs, and they are getting ready to take the leap into professional promoting with the state of California, which is great. It's kind of what the program is about. Sometimes we think about the amateur program only as the athletes progressing from amateur to pro, but it also works that way for our promoters. So one thing we would kind of like to revisit in the near future is the way that we address those pro-am shows to make sure that CAMO is working in an efficient manner with CSAC on pro-am cards, because a lot of those promoters, when they turn pro, will probably do so in a pro-am format, just because it is a little bit new and a little bit of familiarity at the same time. Safety that we've had lately has been fantastic. I gave you guys a good full report last time on our ratios. Nothing has changed since then. But that's about all we have today.
Mr. Chairman, I think you would remember as soon as you were appointed, as a commissioner, we discussed and you met with Mr. Steele about the pro-am situation. And at least from where I'm sitting, I can tell you that the number of pro-ams in the state of California has increased.
It has.
Since we have renegotiated the way that that's been done. The fact that CSAC uses the same officials as CAMO almost exclusively at Pro-Am shows,
Yep.
it creates a lot of synergies that weren't there before, and I believe it was you and Commissioner Shin-Urquidez that worked that out. And that's been, at least where I'm sitting, that's been an overwhelming success. And if we can continue the Pro-Am thing where they move to the pros, that really, the amateurs are what grows the industry, and I'm pleased to hear the move towards Pro-Am events because many states, certainly not all, but many states, the backbone of the entire program is based on the Pro-Am.
Well, I appreciate that feedback. So, and to confirm that, we've loved working with Andy in this capacity. I just felt that maybe it's a good time just to, since we're seeing an increase, if there's anything that we can do better to improve it, we're certainly happy to. But it has been, I feel that it's been very successful training ground as well, these Pro-Am events for our inspectors, who many of them who've made the leap over the years to be professional inspectors. It's been a great training ground.
Our farm system, okay.
It is a farm system. We're looking forward to a good 2017. We have actually had an increase in promoter licenses recently. So I think we're going to have a good 2017. We're very optimistic.
We're expecting it, sir.
I know you are.
Martha, you wanna?
At some point, I know we're doing this C3 Logics concussion system, and we're trying to get all the pros done, but at some point, I don't know if it's possible, it would be nice to get the amateurs started.
Yes.
I mean, that would be ideal, I think, to start the baseline at the amateur level, so that by the time they're in the professionals, we have that tracked.
I agree. I think it's one of the most important things that we could do.
You know, and I was going to talk to Mr. Steele about this next week, but my hope is to have a stakeholder meeting to where we can get a large group of athletes just in one location, amateur, pro, doesn't matter. We've got a lot of units. The system's incredibly easy to use. And just have our inspectors just test everybody and upload it to the neurologists, just for the baselines. So that's the hope.
Ideally, we'd love to be able to find a way to implement that program into CAMO. I mean, that would be fascinating to have an amateur program using that. Obviously, there is a significant cost involved in that program, but possibly, you know, there's a way that we can work together to explore maybe fundraising, some different things to maybe be able to do it. I think it obviously goes beyond the scope of this discussion, but maybe it's something we can look forward to in the future.
Yeah, I think a stakeholder meeting would be great. Sure you'd get a lot of interest.
Not just CAMO, but the other
Yeah.
delegates as well.
Sure you'd get interest from the commissioners here, Dr. Williams, and so. Anything more, Commissioner? Dr. Williams? Vice Chair?
Thank you for the wonderful work you do. And
Thank you.
we're thrilled to work with you and excited about the Pro-Am increase. It helps everybody.
It does.
And in your report, say, our duties and approach to regulating these Pro-Am types of events become confused, and we suggest we address the Pro-Am approach with its inspectors and officials at next possible training. So I kind of wasn't sure. I want to make sure that if you have a concern, let's concretely address it.
The only concern is this: the system works very well, but sometimes over the years, we have new inspectors that come, new inspectors who are leading shows, and maybe they haven't worked a Pro-Am. A lot of them haven't worked Pro-Ams in the past, and now they're seeing more Pro-Ams. So what we would just like to do is address it maybe in a training is that, hey, this is our procedure. This is the way that we work together. Here's everyone's responsibilities. Sometimes with pro-ams, if the inspectors who are in the back room, who might be new inspectors that haven't worked a pro-am, they might see an amateur fighter and not know what to do with him. Those type of things. And if we just have, since it's been a few years since we've kind of gone over it, and we've had a lot of new inspectors, it would just be good to address responsibilities and who's responsible for what so that it's just predictable. So it's not really so much as a problem as just a good opportunity, I think now, anticipating the growth that we're seeing in these to just readdress what our expectations and needs are and who's responsible for what.
So at our regular officials training, we can address that?
That would be
Andy?
inspector
Just
training.
add that to the
An
standard part of our
inspector trainer,
agenda?
It'd be
Okay.
fantastic. The program, has worked great. It's just we have a lot of new people on
Which is
both
good,
sides of the
that's
table. It'd be great to be able to make those as smooth as possible.
Okay, perfect. So we'll put it on the agenda for our further trainings.
That'd be wonderful. Anything else?
No, thank you again.
Commissioner Seller?
All right. Thank you very much.
Andy?
Mr. Chairman, just a note on the USA Boxing. I'll cover that. Mr. Martino is resigning from USA Boxing. He's done a fantastic job. I've very much enjoyed working with him, so I will keep you posted. I'm again working with their new executive director. I believe his name's Mr. Mike McAtee. Is it Mr. Mike McAtee? Mr. Martino had some family issues, so he did a fantastic job. Really, I don't know how many executive directors of that thing I've been through. It's been a lot, and I certainly enjoyed working with him, and he got things done. So he'll be missed. The USA Boxing report's in here. It's a summary. 5,262 members in California. That's roughly 5 times the number of professional athletes the commission licenses. That's a lot. USA Boxing, between the last quarter, has done 51 amateur boxing events, 800 bouts, no significant injuries during that time, and ambulances were on site for all events. USA Boxing's excited about LA still in the running for the 2024 Olympics, so we'll certainly keep you posted on that. But if you have any questions about USA Boxing, I can certainly relay it to them.
Commissioners?
I think he's going to stick around, though, in some capacity and liaise with the commissions. So he's not going away completely, thankfully.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, but he's not going to be the executive director, unfortunately.
Well, we will miss him. And we'll have to maybe send him our regards, if you would, please, Andy.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, next,
I had a question, yeah. Reviewing the minutes from our last meeting, I noted that we were going to follow up on USA Boxing's database. And I know it ties into the discussion we were having last meeting with IKF. And I don't know if there's been progress or we need to make sure it gets on the agenda next time because we have all this, there's not that one central database, and that seems to be a priority as far as safety goes.
we can certainly get that on the next agenda. What we did do between the last meeting and this meeting, is Commissioner Martha and I had, I don't know if it was calls or emails, it escapes me, but we had some communication, I believe it was both, with John Shepard, and John Shepard from BoxRec, and John Shepard is open and interested in creating a kickboxing database for the commissions to use, which I know we talked about it at the last meeting, which was hand in hand with this, so speak to that.
Was there an issue about a USA Boxing database?
Yes.
And where are we on that? Honestly, I've hard,
Yeah, I haven't been on their database in a while. Okay, last time they told me they've improved it. It's good. But I have not been on it recently.
and the transition is hard, so let's just maybe try not to drop that ball when we get the new Mike Martinez replacement.
Okay.
We have an administrative password. Maybe we just update that and just get back on that. I think, yeah, we can just call their office and make sure that it's updated, and we can just get that.
Okay.
Ed, isn't there delegation, aren't they supposed to like show up here in person so many times a year, once a year?
Yeah,
I just want to make sure that we don't really
They've missed the last two.
drop the ball on,
Actually, they sent a representative at the last meeting.
Okay.
Joe Zanders was there. He just didn't speak.
Right.
So this is the only one they've missed, and Mr. Martino did resign.
because I agree, Mr. Martino was a good guy and responsible, and there's probably going to be a lot of changes. We want to make sure that the new people in charge know that their commitment to CSAC is serious, and we're not going to let them, shirk that.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, anything else for USA Boxing?
Mr. Chairman,
USFL perhaps?
with your permission, I'll now move to, I'll take it out of order because USFL has a presentation about the the Assembly Bill regarding concussions. IKF is next. Mr. Fossum is here from the International Kickboxing Federation.
Mr. Fossum is also an agenda item. Do you want to
We
cover
can
this
just
during that agenda
take that
item?
up later.
If you don't
Okay.
mind, Steve, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Okay.
You're still
And
on
then
your report, so why don't we bring up John and...
at that point, Mr. Frank is up, and he asked for a few minutes to show a presentation.
Of course.
Sure.
State your name, sir.
Morning, John Frank, United States Fight League. Due permission, can I invite Mr. Charlie Wan to set up the PowerPoint?
Of course, would you like, we can move, you can, Martha, you just sit right there.
So I guess while he's doing that, I can go over our activities since the last meeting. We've had 3 events, one in Sacramento with 10 bouts, no injuries, one in Riverside, 21 bouts, no injuries. And since I submitted the report, we've had one on December 10th in San Bernardino with 12 bouts, and we've had 3 injuries in that one. One was a elbow from an armbar on an 8-year-old, and a 13-year-old's lower back from back mount position, and a 13-year-old's jaw or cheek from getting struck by an illegal strike. I followed up on them. All 3, their parents and coaches said they were fine after, but the doctor did note the injuries, so we put them on suspension. And I also notified Mr. Folsom because some of the kids compete also in the IKF. And I think he identified one of them and put him on suspension as well. That was the lower back. And I followed up that the nature of the injury was a cup grinding in the back. So it wasn't really serious at the time, even though he looked like he was hurt. Total events for 2016, we had 11 events with 119 bouts, and very few injuries except for this last event. We noticed there was a report on the American Academy of Pediatrics from Rebecca DeMorest and Chris Kochers, and they were identifying injuries and risks related to youth martial arts. We looked at it, and it just didn't, a lot of the numbers didn't seem right to us. They identified Taekwondo, Judo, Karate, but they've also, in the report, listed pankration in reference to USFL and said there was no data on that. So I reached out to Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Brooks who were doing the study for the Andrews Institute, and they said they would send a rebuttal based on what they had now, but I haven't heard anything back yet, if they're able to contact them. And I have some numbers of what they have, which didn't seem correct to me, but as far as right now, our numbers, we've had 566 exposures or in competition. We've had 16 minor injuries, which means there was no time off or no treatment needed. And then 10 injuries that required some type of follow-up or time off from training. And we've had a knee hyperextension on a 15-year-old, a strained thumb on a 13-year-old, a rib contusion on an 11-year-old, a broken arm on a 16-year-old, 2 hyperextended elbows, one 8 years old, one 12, 2 blows to the cheek or jaw from an 8-year-old and a 13-year-old, a fractured index finger of a 12-year-old, and a lower back strain 13-year-old. That's since we've gotten a delegation. So those are all the documented injuries that we have so far. That's all I have for this before we start the presentation. And the presentation is essentially how we plan on complying with AB 2007 and also our comprehensive database that we want to incorporate. And I've been also working with the IKF to hopefully we can both use the same system because we do share athletes. But before that, any questions?
Didn't I not see you all on a CNN program, the Lisa Ling program?
Yeah, there was a Lisa Ling, and then actually 2 days ago, there was something on HBO that I had no idea about that was filmed like 2 years ago. So there's Lisa Ling, I thought was a pretty good representation.
Did you cooperate with that program? Those folks?
Yes,
You did?
yeah.
Okay.
And then there was something on HBO a few nights ago that I had no idea that was out, but somebody notified me. So there's still a lot of media interest in what we do, but I think for the most part they're doing a good job in representing who we are and what we do and kind of the flavor of the organization.
When you are aware, John, or you're contacted, do you let Andy know about that?
We haven't had anything news, I think, for the last several events, except there was another, people filmed like a potential pilot for a show, but they're trying to fish out there, but it's nothing that's going to be aired. But I haven't specifically done that, but I can in the future.
Yeah, I have a request for you to, I don't know if you, when you were contacted by CNN, whomever those folks were, and to let Andy know immediately. I'd rather not just turn on the TV on Sunday night and see. I'd like to be aware that
Okay.
you're working with these folks.
Sure. And a lot of these, they film like a year
Yeah.
or two later, and then it
That's
comes
fine.
on.
Yeah, but you're our delegated entity, and we should be aware, and Andy should be apprised and have some input.
Sure, I can do that
in
easily.
Interaction, so thank you. Let's see that. That'd be good. Commissioners?
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Good? So Charlie Wand is from the Agency of Student Health Resources. For like the last year and a half, I've been trying to get a database that encompasses everything that we need now and everything I think I need in the future. So and this is kind of what we've come up with. I can turn it over to him.
Good morning. My name is Charlie Wund. I'm the president of the Agency for Student Health Research in San Diego, California. Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for having us. We're here to present to you the technology solution that's going to satisfy the requirements for AB 2007, which we know takes effect in January 1st, 2017.
One, before you proceed, could you tell us a little about your agency?
Yeah, absolutely. Agency for Student Health Research was founded in 2010 as a for-profit corporation. We work with youth organizations, high schools, school districts, state associations across the country, as well as healthcare systems, medical researchers, and universities. Our mission and goal is to unite and create registries for youth sports injuries, as well as streamlining workflows and communications.
Have you been aware of these gentlemen, this organization, Andy?
No, sir.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No
Welcome.
worries.
Welcome to the commission.
Thank you for having me. And so today we'll be addressing some of those issues and working on essentially what we refer to as connected care and bridging that gap. In youth sports, and here's a little bit more about who we are as an organization. In my former life, I was a high school athletic director and three-sport collegiate athlete. So a lot of what we do stems from passion to provide and continue to provide safe environments for youth and extending the opportunities for athletic participations and all the benefits that it provides. But what we're looking at now is we're faced with a situation in youth sports that's extremely fragmented. There's not a lot of communication in between stakeholders and caregivers. Much of that is paper-based, and that has a lot to do with tracking concussion education training, return to play, return to learn protocols, as well as a lot of the documentation that goes in and around, like we mentioned before, the baseline and concussion education trainings. This also places a large administrative burden on anyone who's trying to oversee and organize youth sports agencies or individual entities within the state associations or elsewhere. And lastly, what we're not being able to do, and a lot of the times with AB 2007, it represents some of the mandates that come down from the state level that are extremely difficult to enforce. We know that all 50 states have concussion legislation. Very few have enforcement mechanisms that are in place. What we're proposing is a system designed called the Compete Safe Solution, and it is built off of existing technology that's been in operation for 3-4 years now. It is an out-of-the-box compliance solution. It's the only system in the country that has the CDC's heads-up education modules built into the platform, which are also trackable in real time. So someone can log on, complete their required training before participation, and in real time, we're going to have documentation that person's done that. Currently, right now, it's only accessible by paper. It's also built off of role-based and user-based permissions, meaning medical staff users are going to have different levels of access as a parent or a coach would. It is a web-based application that meets all regulatory compliance, both being HIPAA and FERPA compliant. That allows us to work within the school districts and school systems, and also documenting all of that return to play or return to learn clearance, again, only through administrators or medical professionals. Lastly, we are aggregating data and injury trends.
How did you secure your HIPAA and FERPA compliance?
It's a black and white document as far as the regulations that you need to go through as far as any kind of software security systems. We work with, right now, currently 5 of the major healthcare systems in the country, and we've gone through security verifications, validation systems, 60-page documents. It's a lengthy process.
Who supports your endeavor?
In what way?
Financially.
Financially, it's a private funded company.
It's a for-profit.
For-profit company, yes. We do grant work a lot. We've recently completed a grant with the District of Columbia's Department of Health, as well as working with health systems like Children's National in Washington, D.C., MedStar in Maryland, Providence Health Systems in the Pacific Northwest. So different organizations along that nature. Ultimately, it's the people who are working to be proactive and ensure a safe and compliant environment for youth organizations. Those are the people who support the organization. Today we're discussing how our system is being focused on the world of the USFL and some of the mixed martial arts and the arenas, and just familiarizing ourselves with these events and how they take place. Every one of these opportunities with a pre-fight physicals, weigh-ins, and then post-fight evaluations allows us an opportunity to provide a higher level of care for organizations, for the children and the families who are actually participating in these events. The first component we're going to work through is the CDC's heads-up education and content delivery system that's built into our existing injury-free platform. Currently,
concussion education training.
We'll hear
if you are required to take concussion education training per your organization's policy and are finishing up your registration process and choose to complete your training now, you will be brought to this page. You will have to complete the courses in order, starting with the top one. Once you complete the first one, the red X will turn to a green check mark and it will be date stamped. You will then be able to move on to the second one, and so on. When all the red X's turn to green check marks, you will have completed your training. Whether the training is required or not, you will be able to access any of the materials from our training library at any time, which is located down below. For example, parents may be required to sign the Heads Up concussion info sheet. Once you have completed reading the information, select Sign Info Sheet and Submit Signature. You will then be able to print a PDF of your signed info sheet.
This will also send a signal to the administrators of the organization in real time. We'll have a roster that'll show who has and has not completed that, again, per requirements for AB 2007. Those settings are individualized per organization, meaning if the commission wanted to update types of education that's going out, maybe it is dehydration education that needs to go in, those platforms can be uploaded. We can determine who needs to watch those, in what manner, what fashion, and they can all be documented and tracked in the same manner. Ultimately, we'll see an ongoing registry, again, of who has completed. If they haven't completed their requirements, their names are going to appear in red. Next, we're going to talk about the athlete registration process within these youth events that are occurring right now within the USFL. Every opportunity when a child registers, there's a chance for us to be able to validate that they've gone through AB 2007 requirements, their parents have complied, as well as the coaches when they check in or register. What we're proposing then in the building of the new system is an actual kiosk or an ID card that can be tapped into that existing database. So again, when someone completes the concussion education training, that will update their ID card in real time. When they sign in, we're going to verify that they've gone through that clearance process. In that process, at the kiosks, we'll be able to scan an ID, just a picture of that individual. And what we'll see is either a green, you are cleared, you have met those requirements, or potentially a yellow, a pause. Check in with your league official, your administrator, to make sure that something's wrong. There's something that we don't have from you yet that allows us to verify that they've gone through the requirements. Next, we're going to talk about what happens when a child actually becomes injured. And again, this is using the injury-free technology that's currently deployed right now. On those post-fight evaluations, we have the opportunity for those medical officials to update in a web-based manner on a tablet, smartphone, or wherever, on an internet connection, any type of injury reports or post-fight evaluations. If there's a suspected concussion, that's going to create an injury report. In that process, it's going to connect in real time with the parents. That is also a unique stipulation in AB 2007 that no other law in the U.S. has, is that there's notification now required for the parents of suspected incident, treatments, and signs and symptoms that are occurring. So this will satisfy that component as well. But additionally, the parents, we view them as caregivers. So they have the opportunity to read, but also update and add to an existing report at home, updating signs and symptoms that are occurring over a weekend or in between tournaments. Lastly, if a child isn't cleared for participation because that doctor has suspected a head injury and now they've entered the 7-step protocols, their name is going to remain in red just as if they didn't complete the concussion education training. Once they've gone through those required protocols and they've seen a medical doctor, they have a cleared status, that name will be updated, again in real time, only by a league administrator or another medical professional with access to the system. That then will change that name from black into red. Again, if a child were to check in at that registration desk, they would now be able to be completed, or to be able to participate in the event. This is the
Updating and exporting an injury report. First, select the Home tab on the green bar at the top of the page. If you would like to update the injury report by adding any symptoms or treatments, select the injury report, scroll down to the Symptoms and Treatments section, and add any additional ones necessary. Here you will see an Open Notes text field where you can write any notes to describe the symptom. When you are done updating the injury report, scroll down and select Save Updates. You will receive an updated injury report ID number and be able to access the injury report from the home page. To export an injury report, select the injury report, and on the top right, select Export PDF.
So this is, again, you can see in the video, an opportunity for parents to export actual documentation, bring that to their own personal physician, just so there's as much information being transferred as possible, as well as date and time stamping all activity that's going on in that system. So creating transparency in that return to play protocols, making sure everyone is on the same page as where that child is in their stages. We don't want anyone coming back to participate too soon. We call that connected care. The ecosystem, again, that we're trying to create here is, first and foremost, compliance with AB 2007. Go ahead. That's going to involve those background checks for coaches and any league officials that are involved. It's also going to include concussion education training, again, for anyone, coaches, administrators, whoever that might be, as well as that medical history or that return to play clearance. Second, we're going to go through the verified eligibility for those events, meaning we're going to make sure that child isn't currently in some type of return to learn or return to play protocol for suspected concussions. We're going to check and verify their weigh-ins, and we're also going to be able to track on an ongoing basis any type of fluctuations in weight as that child goes from event to event. And lastly, we're aggregating this information, ultimately providing the Commission with a reliable source of information and trends on how to update policies. What type of information do we need to make when it comes to rules and policy changes? Here's a database that you're going to be able to access in a de-identified sense, so that we're not violating, again, HIPAA and FERPA violations. Everything is going to be time stamped with individual ID markers and taking that child's name off of those reports and trend analysis reports. Well, we talk about what the implications could be here, and one of the biggest concerns that organizations have is that it's not necessarily what's going on in their environment, although that is an extreme concern. What's happening is, the largest concern is what's going on outside of my environment. It's why the IKF and the USFL have come together on this, because they know that they have athletes participating in two separate events under two separate organizations. That can also include a school event. It can also include any other youth sport organization that's taking place. So now this registration transcends that child's participation no matter where they are. We currently work with two of the largest youth sports organizations in California already, covering all of the youth rugby participants as well as several school districts in the state.
What is the organization?
Youth rugby. So there's two state associations in the state of California, just because it's so large. There's a Northern California and a Southern California association.
So this fundamentally, and I think it's incredibly thorough and highly valuable, but what you're fundamentally saying is that if you're running a school or a program or an organization, you need to have this to insulate yourself from litigation.
It is an extremely important tool for risk mitigation. When we work with organizations in school districts, we work with the risk the risk liability and risk management departments.
We do this for football, and
that's right.
So across the board, any school district that does not bring this to bear on any of its programs and the participants and their family, you can't participate, I would presume.
They absolutely are now today participating and going about it with paper forms.
Have to participate. And I'm not saying that's good or bad.
Sure.
But I think it's a fabulous idea.
Well, thank you, sir. What we'd like to...
Does this move on at some point to college levels?
To be honest with you, the college levels, well, let me rephrase. Junior colleges, community colleges, yes. Some of those are smaller than some of the high school programs we have here in the state. The Division I and the large universities have an internal medical system that oversees their students, their athletes, that's very thorough. So typically, no. But when we talk about potentials for, and especially in this world, we talked before about the baseline tests transferring and going from youth to amateur to pro ranks and having that baseline transfer them. Now we have a medical history as well. We try to look at it like a DMV. And also, and having a car, you want to get as many miles as you can out of that car. You treat it right, you get its oil changed, and you know what its history is, like a Carfax report. Here, we're going to be able to make sure that children aren't returning to play too soon, and we're going to get the most miles they can in their participations. And that's what we want, healthy athletes for life. In this particular case here, what we're recommending, and we're starting this launch, February 4th, I believe, is the first event. We'll have our beta in production and being used by the institutions here at some of these events. But certainly, opening up the invitation for any of the other delegates to join this in this registry. We're able to, and we do now currently, connect with a number of different registration systems. So meaning many organizations will have their own process for registration for their athletes already in place.
I find it hard to believe that anybody would not do that. It just is stupid.
Well, let's find out how much it costs.
Currently, right now, this is going to be, we're funding the whole project. What we're hoping to do is have a critical mass that we're able to keep this as affordable as possible. Rates vary. We understand the strains that go under and that are put on youth sports organizations. Again, having my background and what we want to accomplish here, we look to the health systems to help underwrite costs, sponsorships, as well as grant-funded projects. So nominals compared to the larger fees and associations.
Are there any organizations I might know of who are financial participants in your organization?
Well, That's, are you referring to the individuals that might be supporting?
Know of any of the organizations, sports organizations?
Sure. So Northern California and Southern California Youth Rugby are both participants. Southern California actually won a national award by the National Council of Youth Sports for their program and our involvement. They actually won that award in front of the National Athletic Trainers Association because of their Forthright Players Welfare Program. There's a good example.
Are you just doing this in California now?
No, sir. We're nationwide. We actually have some international work as well. We work with health systems. Providence Health System is a large one here on the West Coast that you might be familiar with.
How about any of the MCOs, the health plans?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
The managed care organizations, the health plans, have you working with any of those?
Currently, right now, we work with excess liability pools at the state level. One of the largest ones is right here in Sacramento, the School Excess Liability Fund, or SELF. We don't work with the individual plans themselves outside of a Kaiser model. Typically, it's up to the parents on where they're going to go and take their children. We do work with health systems. For example, we just launched a program with the Maryland State Youth Soccer Association, again, not here in California, but large enough for recognition, with their regional healthcare system, MedStar, as a preferred provider. So they're guaranteeing now access for any child who may have any injury, for that matter, 24 to 48-hour access. That's the type of relationships that we try to blend in this coverage of underwriting costs, making it cost affordable, but as well as providing coverage and care for any family, and they won't turn anyone away no matter what their insurance is. Any other questions?
What about the school systems? You said you are working with some school systems in California?
Yes, absolutely. Capistrano Valley is one of the larger, it's the 8th largest in the state that we do work with. We launched a pilot with San Diego Unified in about 2 weeks. And so those are the organizations where we want to be able to overlap this system, this registry, as those children move in and out of these organizations, to be able to ensure compliance, number one, but also safety, number two.
Do you get any pushback from trainers using their existing programs as compared to, because that's one of the things that happens with trainers. They go, I got another registry or another database to fill out. Does it replace what they're using now, or is it added to what they're using?
It actually replaces it. So we love athletic trainers. We work with them all the time. And when we designed the program initially, it was user-face first, mobile first, making sure that we understood what the workflow was of the actual users in the system, especially in a school system. So in an example, many athletic trainers are being outsourced with regional healthcare systems existing in their school systems. They're not school employees. They don't know the protocols. Programs we're launching in Capistrano, for example, an outsourced athletic trainer will submit an injury report that'll actually create an incident report for risk management department in a PDF copy and go through the school's existing protocols. So very much we think, user-friendly first, making sure that it does satisfy their needs, and then the aggregation of data is a byproduct of that communication.
And the work with the school systems, is that, are the school systems paying for that now? Or
Yes, they do. They pay a flat fee of $495 per school per year, and that covers their user base. That is existing with our injury-free technology. That is a platform that we're building our Compete Safe platform specifically for this fight arena, for this fight world. It'll have a new registration system that will meet the requirements, again, to your point, of workflow, making sure that it's not something that we're forcing on that doesn't already go through. We're just we're taking away the paper, which is our main goal here, and increasing the communication.
Based on your engagement so far with these school systems and whatever, do you have a sense, and this is an extraneous question, do you have a sense that less children are participating in football or other contact sports?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I'm necessarily qualified. I'm just an old football coach and athletic director. I can tell you there are trends and there are emerging sports that we recognize that are actually increasing in participation, where some of our other organizations are either flat or are losing members.
Increasing what's flat and failing?
Rugby, for example, is becoming more and more of an emerging sport. After its participation in the Olympics just past summer, we're seeing almost a 15% increase in their participation numbers currently. As a matter of fact, in the world of mixed martial arts and in judo, we're seeing some of the other ones like taekwondo, jiu-jitsu is a big one as well. And I think one of the things that we've discussed with Mr. Franks is that these children are practicing, they have no place to compete. And we want to be able to create a safe playing environment and look to the other organizations, perhaps like football, that have made mistakes in the past and not recreate those mistakes. We want to increase transparency from day one and making sure that we are providing those safer playing environments, because it is almost the minor leagues, if you will, or the future.
I would think that football programs would want to be deeply engaged with it.
Many of them are. Many of them are.
What about the professional league? I mean, is this something the NFL?
That is a extremely sticky wicket. They have their own systems and their own checks and balances in place.
A parallel program to yours?
No, no affiliation whatsoever. They have their own design systems that are internal and regulated separately. That's a big one.
Regulated by them.
Yeah.
Exactly right, yeah. Any other questions?
Fascinating.
Okay.
So the machines for the USFL, for the fight thing that checks people's cards, are those unique for the USFL and IKF, or do you use those machines at other?
Currently, right now, the technology is web-based, so it's all mobile. If you'd like demonstrations afterwards, or at this point right now, we can show you how that works on a mobile phone. It scans a card, an image, and it pops up and pulls into the registration. The kiosk itself is a piece of hardware that, at the right time, when there's scalable populations, we can deploy those at any time.
Okay, you don't need those machines.
Exactly. So every individual would have one card, one registration card, that would accommodate any event that was tied into the
And it can be
database.
scanned on a mobile device.
Correct.
You don't need those kiosks.
You don't need necessarily the kiosk, correct. So if you'd like afterwards, we're happy to show you how that will work.
This is happening at these events, John?
It's going to happen in February 4th. We've been working for about a year and a half trying to design this, and then with the AB 2007, it brought some new things into play. But we're going to try it out in February.
Same for Steve, February, will you utilize this in February? It's on the same track?
There's a lot of work involved with getting this whole thing together, and even at events, making sure everybody's up to speed with all the information we need to put down for them and everything.
Yes or no? You're going to have it in February? Okay, thank you.
Start now.
We're the politicians up here, we'll give those answers, okay?
Is there anything in this that would be relevant to the commission? I mean, in a broader sense?
It's an interesting question. I'm not sure I fully understand in what way would be relevant.
Well, I'm not sure either.
Okay.
But you've innovated something here, at least it's to me new. I'm not nearly as sophisticated as my colleagues. And when you find somebody has an idea that you look at it and say, boy, somebody's gonna make a lot of money here. Is there anything in it that would be at some point relevant to what we do and make us better at what we do?
One of the things that the database is going to also accommodate, it's going to contain records, competition records, and it will be able to tie the records of the different disciplines. For instance, I'll have on the participant's profile, it'll have his pankration competition history and also his Muay Thai competition history, and that can potentially follow them to when they get to the camel ranks. So if we potentially have a child who, by the time he turns 18, has 80 fights, 80 bouts, and when he becomes a camel fighter, camel can look up, the matchmaker can look that up and not set him up with a debut fighter. The same potential is with the IKF. I know last year Steve had called me and asked me about a female fighter that he found out was in the USFL, and she was doing her debut Muay Thai fight, but she's had about 25 fights in the USFL. So that kind of helped him with his matchmaking. And it's a database like that doesn't exist right now that kind of ties the different disciplines in.
Well, Commissioner Sauer, your, I think, very sophisticated comment or question made me think about our responsibility to be compliant with AB 2007, which means that downstreams to our delegated entities, right? Andy, have you thought about that, the application here?
Yes, sir. This goes right in line with that, and that's what the the president, they're using they've already got the heads up concussion protocol built in. So it's the hope that the USFL and the IKF begin using this. In any event, they've got to begin with the heads-up concussion protocol to teach the people. This streamlines that, makes it easier, lets them have notification of their athletes. USA Boxing has a different model. Certainly, I'll introduce this gentleman to the new executive director, USA Boxing, let him talk to them. USA Boxing has already mandated concussion training already before AB 2007 took effect. And then with Camo, Camo is adults.
But I guess that brings up a question in my mind. USA Boxing has been doing concussion training, but are we sure that they're complying with AB 2007, which is different perhaps than their prior training? Because it's our responsibility that they comply with 2007.
It takes effect on January 1st, and it's my understanding they're going to use the Heads Up CDC system, CDC program.
USA Boxing is?
USA Boxing.
Okay, okay.
And from what I understand, the system, it's going to be made so it can interface with an existing database. So if somebody has something in place already, they don't have to throw it out. It would be able to interface.
So this is like it's a mobile reader technology that you're using?
The registration system? Yes.
And it's cloud-based?
Yes, it is.
So all the data that you're gathering then goes to the cloud. So theoretically, then if we were to do our, say, federal IDs, if we were to do our federal IDs in such a way that everyone's federal ID is read through a mobile reader, and all of our other IDs were read, whatever data is read through a mobile ID reader, and then is stored the same way, then all of the information that we have could theoretically be interfaced the same way, including potentially, I mean, as long as there's like security, right? So that it could be accessed. Professional fighters at some point. That would make it a lot easier, and then we won't be paper-based, because one of the problems that we do have is we get to an event, we're missing X. We don't have so-and-so's records, we don't have, blah, 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 and then we're scrambling for, right? So I think at some point we move towards this kind of technology, it makes it a lot easier.
To give you an example of the situation you're describing, we do that currently now with some of our rugby partners. They have existing systems already in place. They're player card registrations that are specific to USA Rugby. Our information supplements that. So when it comes to medical or compliance with state laws for concussion education training, the system that is housed in our system, the status, if you will, of that individual is then pushed into their existing system. So they read on the back end of things, and that's exactly how you've described the system working.
And that's also one of the issues that we have. Our inspectors spend a whole lot of time doing paperwork before and after. Well, anyway, that's probably what Commissioner Van is talking about.
My name's on the list.
We certainly would invite somebody or all of the commission members to have access to the system in its beta form so that you'll actually see the registration, you'll understand how it's working on the back end, you'll have access and oversight, or if you designate someone who potentially would have that role of oversight, that's well within the permissions and the infrastructure that we have existing today.
Right, so.
Are you meeting with other commissions?
State commissions? No, sir. We work directly with the state associations, so lots of executive directors of the individual states. The question, and one of the reasons why we're very happy to be here and pleased to see California leading the way, This issue has not been addressed at the state level the same way. Many of the organizations, again, back to these mandates are unenforceable. It leaves a question of who is the responsible party. And many of the state associations have stopped waiting for that answer and taken that role themselves. This commission is doing a great job of leading the way for the entire country, because we don't see this very often.
How do the medical records then get stored in the cloud with the security adaptation so that they, so do the physicians also have to subscribe to this technology?
So to that question, no. We don't require an individual doctor or physician to have access to a portal. The same way a doctor's note is written now, it can be, you can take a picture, you can scan a file, and then hand that to an administrator. An administrator has that same role-based permission to be able to update a status. So for that reason, we don't technically store medical information in our system. But medical staff users have a higher level or a different level of access where they're able to communicate only to other medical professionals within the system. And we separate that information out in the security permissions. A lot of that, again, is black and white when it comes to how you store information like that with electronic medical records or electronic health records in a health system.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll try to keep an eye on our agenda and our other responsibilities today. This has been great, fascinating. Obviously, we're very interested. Thank you for coming. If you could maybe provide maybe the commissioners as well with your contact information. So if, for example, if Commissioner Martha wanted to get a demo, or I certainly would, that would be great. We really would like to learn more about
Absolutely. We have some handouts, so make sure.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, John. That's right. He's always one step ahead of me, John Frank. So.
Do you run this thing, or what's your role in it?
I'm the president of the organization, yes.
So you run it?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it.
Handouts right now.
Thank you, John.
Approach the bench.
Yes. Commissioners, it's 10 to 12.
Thank you.
Already?
Yeah. Would you like to take a break? And then I think if we do that now, we could come back and probably finish the rest, no?
Were we going to have lunch and look at the videos?
Oh, with lunch and the videos, right. What is that? Lunch and videos?
No, sir, we weren't allowed to take food in the room. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, and I'm eating in here.
We can go upstairs to the cafe.
Well, for lunch, yeah, there's several lunch
lunch.
options. But are you all, folks, are you
Yeah, we
all
should do now before the
okay?
rush. What you think?
Okay for a break now? So what do we think? Back at Target, 12:30 or so? Or? Okay?
Can you eat somewhere in this building?
Yes, sir, up on floor, is it 5 or 6, John?
I don't remember. Where
I
is it?
think it's 6. There's a cafe.
It is. It's the 6th floor, but you have to go out to the elevators by the governor's office, yeah. Up to the 6th floor. There's there's cafeteria, big tables, yes, thank you. Okay, folks, we are going to take a break, and we will be back here at 12:30. Thank you.